as a woman, you have every right to be angry. You have every right to feel violated. Just even paying attention to the small microaggressions that we experience, the little sexist comments and innuendos, the way that men are put first. It's definitely something that is angering. And if you're someone who doesn't connect with those feelings, you're like, oh, that doesn't bother me. Maybe it doesn't, or maybe it does, but you just don't let yourself connect with those feelings. But then it builds up, and then you're angry and irritable, and you don't know why you have an anger problem. But it's not an anger problem. It's actually a not knowing how to feel anger and use anger to set effective boundaries and maintain them because there's some other stuff going on.
Hi, I'm Jen Barnes, and you're about to experience how to ditch the old ways of doing things, embrace your neurodivergence, learn tips and tricks to function optimally, and love yourself, neurodivergence and all. Welcome to the Self-Loved Woman podcast.
Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. I'm excited to have a really important conversation with you today about how we as women undervalue ourselves and put ourselves last again, and what to do about it. Because the way that we've been approaching this, at least in the therapy world and self-help world for years, just isn't working. And I see it in my practice. I see it with the women I work with in my program Ascend. I see it everywhere. And I think it's time that we have this conversation. So I'm glad you're here. You might be wondering, like, is this for me? And if you're someone who, you might be like, oh yeah, I always put myself last. And you might be like, yep, Jen, I'm here. But you might be someone who sneakily puts yourself last, right? What might that look like? It's possible that you have good intentions for your self-care. You maybe even slip in a workout every day. But when it comes to prioritizing your business or even listening to a podcast, hopefully mine, but maybe others that might help you grow, that you end up doing things for other people and you're like, oh, I'll get to my stuff later. Like the to-do list is what everyone else needs, what everyone else wants, what you need, and then maybe someday what you want. Does that sound familiar? And it's really common. I see it all the time with women. And believe me, we come by this honestly, and we're going to talk about that today. But I just want to name this is super common. And it makes it really hard, not only to enjoy your life and have good health, but to build a business. Because to build a business, you have to take the time to work on your business. And a lot of times when we as women put ourselves last, that means our business also gets put last. And so then it doesn't happen. Oh, I'll work on my business after the kids go to bed, or and then we're too tired. Or, oh, I'll work on it here and then someone else needs help or wants help. There's a difference sometimes. And so a lot of times our business can also get put on the back burner with us. And that's a problem because your business is going to be your income if you're not already having a business, right? If you're still building it, my guess is you're hoping to shift from having income somewhere else to having your business be your full income. But that transition is never going to happen if you don't learn to prioritize your business, which also means prioritizing yourself. Because not only does your business get put on the back burner when you put everyone else before you, but also your own inner growth and self-care. And we know that because you are the light that attracts people to you, because chances are, if you're someone who follows me, the type of business you have is one of meaning and purpose where you're helping others, then the more you grow, the more you do your inner work, the more you work with your ADHD and the challenges of being ADHD throughout your life that brought with it the criticism and the correction and likely some now unhealed wounding, which wasn't your fault, but is now yours to try and find a way to work through. Because all of that is true, you have to prioritize yourself for your business to grow. And you're like, I know, stop stressing me out. And I know that. And that's part of the problem is a lot of times when we say it, women are like, yeah, I know, I really should. And I get it. And I think that a lot of us, or I've observed that a lot of us in this space around helping women have been getting this wrong because we say all the right things. We make the argument for all the right things. but then we're not sharing what to do about it or really how to do. We're like, oh, set more boundaries and stuff like that. I want to get into a little bit of what people like me and me have been doing wrong for years. And I've noticed this hasn't been working, and I've been banging my head against the wall, like, why can't I help women put themselves first? And I figured it out. I'm not going to pretend like I have all the answers, but I see the hole in my reasoning and a lot of the reasoning of people like me, right? So I want to talk about that. But first, I want to talk about what we're getting wrong. One of the things that you've probably heard or read is that you need to set boundaries. And I get it. That's probably true, right? A lot of women have issues with anger. And when I say issues, it's not really issues. They're told they have an issue with anger, or they have outbursts, or they're irritable and angry. But I want to say something. Anger is your body's way of saying, yoo-hoo, there's a violation here. Something's not equitable or fair. And we have righteous anger. We have a right to be angry right now. I think we're right around equal pay day time. I'm shooting this on April 18th. And that's only for white women. If you're a Black woman, it's later. And if you're an Indigenous woman, I think equal pay day is in July or August, which is just ridiculous, but also tragic that this in 2024 is the reality. So as a woman, you have every right to be angry. You have every right to feel violated. Just even paying attention to the small microaggressions that we experience, the little sexist comments and innuendos, the way that men are put first. It's definitely something that is angering. And if you're someone who doesn't connect with those feelings, you're like, oh, that doesn't bother me. Maybe it doesn't. Or maybe it does, but you just don't let yourself connect with those feelings. But then it builds up, and then you're angry and irritable, and you don't know why you have an anger problem. But it's not an anger problem. It's actually a not knowing how to feel anger and use anger to set effective boundaries and maintain them, because there's some other stuff going on, which we're going to get to. So I've spent years trying to convince women to set boundaries. And a lot of times women actually know what to say to set boundaries. They just are uncomfortable doing it because they don't like conflict. They're afraid someone's going to be mad at them or whatever. And so a lot of us have spent years talking about, yep, if they're mad, that's because they've been benefiting from your boundaries. And so of course they're mad. And we even sometimes teach women how to deal with when other people are mad. But there's still that underlying fear of having people be mad that we'll talk about. Another thing I've been working with women on is how do you maintain those boundaries? And again, it's not that y'all don't know how. Maybe some don't. But by now, the majority of us, with Brene Brown's wonderful work, if you've come into contact with her, or there's many people who talk about boundaries, we know how. Or we know what to do, I should say, but we don't know how to get ourselves to do it. But you have people like me being like, oh, you just need to set boundaries and tell them this and tell them that. But there's something stopping you. There's something stopping you. I've also talked with women about, well, you need to learn how to delegate, because we all do, right? Like I learned how to delegate. We need to learn how to delegate. And if you have kids and a spouse, you can work on building a family of teamwork. It's actually a module I taught in my first program I ever did, is building a household of teamwork, and talking about all of the things at different ages that kids are capable of doing, and that it's healthy for them to learn to do, because then they learn how to be productive adults. Like when we do stuff for our kids, we're taking away their lesson. We're taking away their learning and growth on how to be a functioning human in the world. And I get it at first, but it's so much easier just to do it. And I'm like, yes, it's easier now, but it won't be easier when they're 13 or 23 and still living in your house, or maybe 30 and still living in your house, right? Which maybe you're like, that'd be great. Okay, fine, that's for you. But a lot of women, that's not for them. As much as y'all love your kids, the plan isn't for them to live there forever. And yeah, delegating is important. And getting our spouses on board with our business and our own self-care can be really challenging, especially if you are heterosexual and you're married to a man. Because the thing is, white men, cis white men, especially hetero ones, have been programmed to put themselves first and not really be sensitive to the needs of those around them. Not that they're like intentionally assholes, but it's just not in their programming. Men don't go through the same journey we do. Men don't receive the same messages we do. around having to put other people's first and always thinking of others. And sure, some of that might be innate with the hormones we have and our womb and all that is to help others. But the way that we're socialized is an extreme of that, right? You might even call it the wounded feminine. So that we're always doing for others and we're never doing for ourselves. And that's a problem. That's a problem because women are meant to be leaders. We're amazing leaders because of our experience and knowledge, innate wisdom around connection and community. The way we're raised is to serve others. And then we couple, if you're heterosexual, you might couple with someone who's a cisgendered hetero man, especially a white man, who might not fully be aware of their privilege and how that shows up. And there's some men are getting better at it, but as a therapist for women, in my experience, a lot aren't. And so women, a lot of you are exhausted from doing everything, but more so from having a partner who in our minds would be a partner in the real sense of the word and actually share the load, the mental load, the physical load, all of it. But that's not happening. And a lot of times there's difficulty getting support to even do our self-care. Sometimes not, sometimes yes. And so we want to get our spouses on board. But until we deal with these underlying things that I'm going to talk about that are the real problem, that's going to be even harder. Because guess what? Our spouses, no matter how good of a person they are, when we start asking them to do stuff that we've been doing for them and they've been benefiting from that, there's going to be a fight because now they're asked to do more work and they don't want to. And to be fair, wouldn't we do that? Maybe, I don't know, we're women. We're probably like, okay, yeah, this is my lot in life. But most people, when someone puts more work on their plate, are not going to be like, yeah, unless it's something you really enjoy doing. But for, hey, babe, I need you to help me clean the bathroom, like the toilet's dirty. They're not going to be like, what? I'm so excited to do that. Unless cleaning toilets is their favorite thing in the world, right? And so the problem isn't the response. It is problematic. It would be great if society would shift in how we socialize boys and men. So the patriarchy has a huge role here, right? And all of our internalized patriarchy, including in us women, which we're going to talk about. But that's not happening yet. So then we as women, if we want things to be different, need to figure out how do we get ourselves to communicate in ways that other people listen. But it starts with us. It starts inside of ourselves. And I want to just say, we come by all this honestly, whether just our socialization as women to serve and be nice and be kind and be the helper. There's so many studies I've read. I can't even cite them because I've read so many and now I'm like forgetting about how before preschool, girls and boys are pretty much similar around all of this. We're similar around our emotions, being able to express emotions. We're similar in terms of assertiveness and all that. But by the time we're about 4 or 5, you already start to see a difference in girls, which to me is really sad. Like we don't come out of the womb putting ourselves last. And if you're listening to this, you're like, but that's selfish to put myself first. Then you're buying into the patriarchy. Because I hate to be cliche, maybe I don't totally hate it, but to be cliche, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first because you can't serve and help others in an effective way. And if you've ever tried in your business, you'll notice they don't make progress. I notice when I'm having a hard time and I'm not working through my stuff, it is much harder for me to serve my clients quite as effectively, even though I think I am, and their progress can stall a little bit. Not entirely, and it's certainly not my fault, but where we are impacts others. And that's not the only reason, though, that we need to put ourselves first is to help others, but also because we deserve to have a good life too. Talk about equity, right? Our only reason for putting ourselves first doesn't have to be that it will help us serve better. That's some pretty backwards reasoning, but sometimes we have to start there to get ourselves to feel comfortable. But in all reality, why don't we deserve to get to have a nice, relaxing life as well? Why? Just because of the sex organs that we have and perhaps the gender assigned at birth that we've chosen to maintain for whatever reason, why does that have to dictate that oh yeah, I don't get to enjoy my life. I don't get to put myself first. That's ridiculous and tragic. But yet it's true. Another place this shows up is in religious culture. So many of our religions, I grew up Catholic, and it was all about the men, right? Like the women were not, the women were there to serve. They were the church hall ladies, right? Everyone remembers the church hall ladies, and they did all the stuff behind the scenes to help everyone. But it was the man who was preaching the gospel and the sermon. And that's true in so many faith systems, right? That's problematic because that message just, it subconsciously tells women that we're not the leaders, we're not good enough, we're the servants. And there's so many ways that's true. But then also, if you grew up in a faith system where sacrifice, you have to sacrifice and serve others. And don't get me wrong, as someone who enjoys serving others for a living, and I love helping people, if we only do it from a place of, oh, I have to sacrifice, we can get into this martyr thing and get resentful. And there can be some passive aggression that goes on versus serving from an open, healed heart, or as healed as possible, right? I don't think anyone's ever fully healed, but serving from a place of generosity and love and compassion and abundance versus serving because we have to sacrifice for others. And I got to tell you, the interesting thing to me as I was preparing this podcast that came to me is there's only these belief systems in religious culture. And I'm not just, it's not only religious culture, but who talk about service and, yeah, you have to put others first and sacrifice. But are the people who are saying that doing that? Because it seems to me that the people at the top have really nice homes and cars, and they have a lot of time for themselves. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting feed or stuff that you're feeding us, direction that you're giving us, that you have to sacrifice. The message I got, you have to sacrifice to get to heaven. I don't know if anyone else got that, but the people at the top aren't doing that. So that seems interesting. There's a hole in their logic there. Unless they don't care, they're going straight to hell. I don't know. I'm not saying that they are, but I'm just saying, right? It's curious. And not all of you maybe grew up in a religious tradition. I'm certainly not trying to rip on anyone's faith system, but rather to start to poke holes in whatever systems you grew up in. And mine happened to be Catholicism, and be like, huh, does that really make sense? Where did I get this belief? Where did I get this message? And now we're getting into the meat of it. Because here's the thing, you probably know the tools. You probably know that you need to set boundaries, so that if you set boundaries, you'd spend more time in your business, and that time that you spent because you wouldn't be so stressed from doing so much for everyone else and nothing to care for yourself, that actually be more productive. And that the things that you put out there are better received. And people are like, oh my gosh, you get me. Like, you probably know that on some level. You're probably like, yeah, I know, Jen, I know. But you don't do it. You don't. And it's not because like you're a bad person, right? There's no shame in it. It's because that's how you've been socialized. That's what you've been taught to do. And so if we want to get to the bottom of this, if we want to start to put ourselves first, whatever that looks like, if we want to put our business first, then we have to deal with this underlying stuff, our internalized patriarchy, those I'm a good helper messages that we got, right? I have to catch myself when I see girls being good helpers. I'm doing air quotes, which you can't see because you're on audio, but I have to catch myself when I'm like, oh, you're such a good helper. I'm like, stop saying that. Or I'm like, oh, you're so pretty. Stop saying it, right? Like, it's so hard because it's how we're all socialized to talk to girls. And it's not that we don't want to tell girls that they're pretty, but we also want to point out their other strengths. Or maybe instead of putting that on them, our opinion, maybe we say, especially if it's people we know, wow, how do you feel wearing that? And help them develop their own internalized sense of how they want to be in the world, right? Rather than trying to model them on how to be with our compliments and our criticism. But the way we deal with this in ourselves is to really do the inner work. We start to notice the parts of ourselves that are giving us the messages that we need to be this way. And it takes work. And sometimes it takes other people pointing out that we're doing it. But if you're not finding time for yourself to do your self-care, like to exercise or meditate or whatever it is that helps you feel grounded and happier in life, more fun, connect with joy, but then also helps you do what you need to do for your business. If you're not able to do that, then you have some of these internalized messages, whether from the patriarchy, your religious upbringing, which is ripe with patriarchy, just the way the world is, your family system, your school system, whatever, then those are things that they gave you some beliefs that are limiting you and that are no longer effective or true. You may have needed them to get by, but now they're getting in the way of your business. And so it's time to notice that and be like, why am I not setting this boundary? And dig in, do some writing on it, really try and unpack it and be like, oh, because there's a part of me that is afraid someone will be mad at me. That's worth digging into. Why don't you trust that you can handle that? Because I guarantee your highest self on a deep level knows how to handle it. But you may have parts of you that are much younger that don't know how to handle it or that are scared. Or maybe you don't know how to handle it. And then it's like figuring that out, right? What would I do if someone's mad at me? How do I not fall apart if someone's mad at me? How can I separate that someone being mad because of the boundary I set doesn't mean that I'm a bad, defective person? And if they're mad at me and don't want to know me anymore because I set a boundary to care for myself, do you really want to know that person anymore? I'm not saying we just like randomly cut people out of our lives, but if people don't eventually come around to our boundary, they're going to be mad at first, right? But if they don't eventually come around to you prioritizing yourself and your business, and while still doing loving things for your kids or your spouse or other loved ones, right? But if they don't come around to that eventually, the question is, what are they doing in your life? Because to me, it seems like maybe they're just using you for what they get out of you. It's always curious to me when I hear wives talk about their spouses, like, don't want to help around the house, even though they're both working outside the home. And I hear their spouses don't want to help around the house. And I'm like, don't they see how stressed you are doing all the stuff, right? The kids, the pets, the doctor's appointments, the birthday presents, the birthday parties, the mental load of everyone's calendar, the house cleaning, the finance, like it's everything, right? And I'm like, don't they see how stressed you are? They're like, yeah, they just don't want to help. And I'm like, but if someone loves and cares about you, I can't imagine them being like, yep, I'm fine with her being so stressed that she can't sleep at night and that she's having heart issues or developing type 2 diabetes or whatever, or a chronic health problem. Like, I just have a hard time believing that person truly loves and cares about you. And I'm not here to bust up marriages, but that's a conversation to be had. Maybe they don't realize they're doing it. But sometimes, yes, when we set boundaries, when we put ourselves first, the people in our life will change. And yeah, we're going to lose some people, but we will gain people who love us more. And that the thing that we gain more than anything is we love ourselves and we love our life and our businesses thrive. And so doing this deeper work of working with the parts of you is really essential. Working with the parts of you that are scared to set the boundaries, working with the parts of you that don't even see that you're putting everyone else before yourself. But I guarantee you are if you're not making time for your business, if you're not having at least 30 minutes of self-care every day. And you're like, Jen, I've got kids. I get it. I know that you do. But if you're a single mom, okay, that might be different. Find your people to help you be able to get some time to yourself. But if you're in a partnered relationship especially with the father of those kids, where's he? I bet he gets his self-care. I bet he has time for his work. And so this is about learning to prioritize yourself. And in your head, you may even be having messages that are fighting me and be like, I can't even listen to this. You're upsetting me. You're pissing me off. This isn't true, whatever. But then dig in, do some writing. Like, what is coming up for you around this? Because that's the work. Because that's the work. Until you do that work, You're not going to be able to set the boundaries that people like me have been encouraging you to set for years. You're not going to be able to make time to go for a walk in the morning or meditate or do yoga. Because until you believe you deserve it, until you believe it's necessary, and until you believe you can handle other people's responses about making this change, you're not going to do it, not consistently. And that's a problem because not only is it going to affect your bottom line in your business and affect the way that you can actually help people make changes in their lives, but it's going to impact you. It's going to create stress and long-term health problems eventually. It's going to make it hard to sleep at night. It's going to just make you feel like you're always just, and that's a problem because not only is it going to affect your bottom line in your business and affect the way that you can actually help people make changes in their lives, but it's going to impact you. It's going to create stress and long-term health problems eventually. It's going to make it hard to sleep at night. It's going to just make you feel like you're always just running and can never just take a breath and relax. And it's going to steal your joy. And so if you're ready to do some of this deeper work, I'm excited. I'm not going to say in 3 days, we're going to do all of this work for you, but I'm going to show you how. So if you want to work through these invisible obstacles with ADHD, including the people pleasing, right? Which I didn't say today, like a piece of it is when we have ADHD, we especially learn how to put others first as a way to try and make up for what we've been told are our flaws. So we end up saying yes even more, I think. I don't know, it's not competition, but right? So if you're ready to work through these invisible ADHD obstacles so that you can build a prosperous and meaningful business that you love and a life that you love eventually, then you're invited to my free 3-day live event, which starts this week, April 25th. And if you're catching this after that, there's a replay available through, I think it's like May 3rd or May 10th. I can't remember. May 10th. It's available through May 10th. You're welcome to catch it, the replay, and it'll be available to you. I'm starting to think about opening up like a VIP option where you can like have access to it longer. So stay tuned for that. Watch my Instagram, which you can find in the show notes for if that's happening, or your email. One thing I want to say is you can sign up. There's a link in the show notes, but also make sure when you sign up, you confirm that it's okay to receive email from me because that's where all the goodies will be. And that confirmation oftentimes goes to spam or junk. So there's that extra step in there, which I know extra steps are hard for ADHD, but I want to make sure you catch this. So I would love to invite you to this 3-day event where we're going to work on overcoming these invisible obstacles, or at least I'll show you what you need to do. All right, it's been a pleasure. Take care, and I'll see you next time.